You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Well, here we are back on the Batuta Advocate radio show. You're joined by myself, Clancy Overall, and of course, editor-at-large Errol Parker. And today's guest, we have probably one of the most high-profile constituents of the Dixon electorate, proud North Brisbane man, Strathpine West boy.
Yeah, Strathpine West, yeah, early days.
Drew Mitchell, thank you for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me, guys. It's an honour.
Now, you only recently just stopped playing.
Yeah.
That was a pretty long career. I mean, in terms of professional rugby union, you had a few injuries along the way, but nothing that really fucked you up.
Yeah, really only one bad injury. Like I tore both hamstrings a number of times and had, those ones that put me out 4 to 6 weeks here and there. But 2011 at Suncorp, playing for the Waratahs against the Reds, I was chasing a kick. And Scotty Higginbotham may have changed his line just to run me off the ball, and my big toe got caught in the turf and went over on the ankle and spun the foot around. So that one put me out for a little bit. Initially, I got back for the World Cup maybe 3 or 4 months later, but then had some pretty bad issues after that.
Scott Higginbotham, he's actually got a track record of accidentally landing on someone's leg or foot, doesn't he?
Well, I played him when I did come back, and he was playing for the Rebels then. Yeah. And it was almost like deja vu, like we put a box kick over and I was chasing again. He went to run me off the ball. I said, "Oh, mate, fuck it, don't do it again." And he just bit straight back. He goes, "Fuck off, can't I do it?" Well, I don't know if I could say that to you. Right. He goes, "Mate, I'll fucking do it again." I was like, "Oh," so I just stopped in my tracks immediately. I was like, "I don't need that." But we're good.
Yeah. Another Brisbane boy, actually. Gold Coast boy, Higginbotham, wasn't he?
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Started in soccer. Fun fact, like Dean and Kemp. Now, you played and you were included in 2 World Cup squads.
3.
3?
Yeah. Which one have you discounted me on?
2011, but that's the one that a lot of people in the industry like to forget.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, so, I mean, you know what? I'm pretty good at suppressing. For your benefit and for our benefit.
Thank you, yeah. For everyone's benefit.
To be honest, I saw where the campaign was going and I jumped ship early and I left after the game against Russia. I got injured in that Russian game and got on the first flight out and actually watched the rest of that tournament from a music festival, just off San Francisco on a naval base, looking back over the Alcatraz and the mainland. So I couldn't get out of there quick enough.
Tell us, is that what happens? If you get injured in a World Cup, they'll send you home?
Yeah, you're on the next flight, basically. Right. Sometimes the rules differ a little bit, but at that point, no one could come and replace me until I'd left. Yeah. And and I think Lockie Turner was the guy that came over to replace me, and it was literally the next morning I was on a flight. Yeah, and, right. My parents were coming over to watch the rest of the tournament and felt pretty bad about the fact that I was leaving. I was like, "Mum, I've already booked a flight to LA, don't worry."
It was only over in New Zealand though. I mean, it wasn't like they were going all the way to Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
But this World Cup starts this weekend is in Japan.
Yeah.
Have you played much rugby in Japan?
I've played... Actually, no. I played a schoolboys tour there. I played one game against the Japan schools, but we played a test match up there against the All Blacks at Bledisloe, but I was carrying the water on that occasion, and that's pretty much my stint. I commentated one game for the Sunwolves up there, but that's about it.
Right.
Yeah.
As a rugby player, I guess, particularly Australian rugby players, they get to travel the world a lot. Yeah. As seen by the beer you're drinking tonight, Vonu Pure Lager, which you must have picked up in your travels.
Well, yeah, I just thought it was important that we acknowledge the clash between the Wallabies and the Fijians this weekend. And, obviously you've got your great drop here, the Batuta Bitter, and I thought maybe I could bring in some Fijian lager and wake up pretty dusty tomorrow.
Yeah, nice Corona clear bottle. It looks like it's a real summer ale. Now, where was your first kind of getaway? Where'd you get to, playing outside of Australia?
Well, I was actually... Australian schoolboy. So once every 3 or 4 years is like a big tour, and my year we went to Japan, Wales, Scotland and Ireland. Yeah. Which I was 17 years old and
very well behaved.
Yeah, hadn't really left Australia. I think I had one tour to New Zealand prior to that. That was pretty eye opening, and I actually had only been overseas really just for rugby until I don't know, maybe my mid to late 20s, where I actually thought, no, I need a holiday. I need to get away just to actually go away and enjoy it. So, but that's part of the appeal with rugby.
Well, that's kind of rare for a rugby union boy to have not gone overseas, to not go skiing in Val d'Isere, to not see the wonders of the Grand Canyon. But how does a boy from Strathpine, like one of the real rugby league heartlands, how'd you end up playing this code?
Well, so my father was in the army, so I was actually born when Dad was based at Holsworthy here out west of Sydney, and out at Liverpool I was born. Moved around quite a lot, but Mum and Dad settled in Brizzy almost when I was 11, 12 years old or something. So from that point I was Brizzy based, and
he was at Nogra.
Yeah, he was at Nogra then. Yeah, and I was rugby league all growing up. So I only played rugby league, and even when I went to, when we were in Brisbane, I was playing for the Brothers Holy Spirit Hornets, and then went to Aspley Devils a little bit later on. But it wasn't until I was 13, went to a private school, St Pat's College out at Shorncliffe, that I played union and league each weekend. And then it was around 17 where, I'd started making some schoolboy teams, and I was speaking to someone at the Canterbury Bulldogs about potentially a Jersey Flag deal. So I was faced with either Queensland Reds Academy or Canterbury Bulldogs Jersey Flag, and someone said to me, Drew, rugby league you can play in Newcastle and Townsville, rugby union you can play in Paris and London.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, where do I sign?
That was the decision. I mean, it is that's something a lot of people view when they're weighing the two up, because a lot of people do get that option.
Well, I suppose that would have all been worth it. After you go from there, you end up in the Reds in your first year, score 11 tries, and then you're in the Wallabies. This is all before you're 20, 21.
Yeah. I mean, and that was, it was quite unique for me, because when I was at secondary school, the guy that I looked up to most was Chris Latham, and I was a left-footed fullback. He was a left-footed fullback. And and I like the way
socks down, Chris Latham.
I mean, my like I said, my father's in the army, so I had garters in my socks, mate. So, I had pleats down the front of my shorts, everything. But when I say unique, because then I got to play alongside him, and I was training alongside him every day. I got to know him, personally off the field, and then to kind of learn your craft with a guy that you'd looked up to for so long. Of course, I was never going to push him aside from his favourite position. Yeah. So that's when I parked up on the left wing. I had a guy, small character in Wendell Saylor on the other wing. So, I was around these guys. It was really quite eye-opening for me really early on. And, Wendell would call me the White Wendell, and I was always just going along on his coattails and all this sort of stuff. Wendell was my first roomie at professional level, and I didn't, a lot of my game day preparation was mimicking these players, because I didn't know what my preparation was at that point. Yeah. And I'm a very different person to a Chris Latham, and I'm also very different to Wendell, but it took me a long time to kind of take bits and pieces from each of their preparations to find what worked for me. But I remember, we used to go on game day, even at home games, to the Sofitel in Brisbane. And you'd partner up, and you do your meetings, and you go and have a nap and whatever, and then you'd go downstairs for your meal. And Wendell wouldn't go down to the meal because we'd be watching Sky Racing, and he'd order a steak sandwich with chips and 2 bottles of Coca-Cola up into his room, and he'd just sit there in his red undies, and I'm like, okay, well, this is obviously acceptable, so I go times 2, and that was my game prep, and I realised pretty early that perhaps that wasn't me, and I didn't have the disposable income that Wendell did.
What is bulletproof?
Yeah. I mean, but even then on Wallaby tours, he wouldn't let me go to bed until he beat me at FIFA. And he was always like £50 for FIFA, and so I'd win. I'm thinking £50 was like I'm living off this for a while, you know. I'd win, and he's like, nah, we're going again. Double or nothing. And we just keep going until he's
got a real Michael Jordan energy.
Until I then owed him money, and then he'd go, all right, Big Dell's going to sleep. And I'm like, what? You got to give me another chance. He's like, no, Big Dell's going to sleep. I'm like, oh, man. So, but it was really quite cool to kind of grow up and in that environment around those guys that I looked up to for so long, and get to know, part of what made them great, because, what worked for Wendell was to be relaxed and be himself away, and he, he doesn't get the career that he had if he didn't know when to switch on and how to switch on. Chris Latham was, he wasn't doing those types of things, but he had his own way as well about the balance. And it was really quite cool to see what worked for different players. And then ultimately find what worked for me.
Yeah. Some blokes, you would say you had a very long career for, a full contact sport, but some blokes just keep going. Like Smith is an example of that. Do you reckon he could still be playing? Like, are there some blokes you reckon could have played until they were 50?
Oh, yeah, George could most definitely still be playing. But I think maybe his wife had a fair bit to say about it after a while. Because also, I mean, Georgie he went to France, then he was back to Japan, then he came to the Reds, and he went back over to the UK, and then he's been in Japan again. Like, because of the way that the game is here in Australia, it's very much turned into a young man's game.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started back in sort of 2004, my first Wallaby tour, I was one of 2 or 3 young guys around the age of 20, and the rest were the senior statesmen. Now there's almost 2 or 3 older guys, and the rest of you're around 20 to 23. So there's been a real shift in the last decade about how we view our players, and we see it in the media, or even like just on the narrative in social media, that as soon as someone hits 30, they're over it, and you're like, well, and whereas you look at the Northern Hemisphere, and like they're celebrating people at 35 and 36, like because they still add value, and they know how to manage them and get the best out of them, as opposed to still training them like they're 18. They manage them well.
Yeah, well now there's Adam Ashley Cooper, and he's 41 or 42, isn't he?
Well, you know what? He's one day younger than I am.
Right.
So he is born on the 27th of March, one day after me. He's also 1 Wallaby cap behind me. So I was Wallaby number 799. He's 800.
Yeah.
He's got a few more than me now. But and also both our mums' names. My mum's name's Karen. His mum's name's Karen. Both spelt the same. Like there's some real unique synergies between and it's also really quite weird because you don't often become really close friends with people that you're opposing. Like I got dropped for the 2007 quarterfinal at the World Cup for Adam, and and I in 2 years ago I married him and his wife Anna in France. So we've been able to put those fierce contests aside and obviously not take it personally, because we're not the ones picking each other ahead of each other. But I'm really excited to see Adam get a chance at this World Cup. I know a lot of people have a lot of opinion based on the age. But I thought...
But if it was Shabal, they'd be cheering.
Exactly right. And I think that he did it the right way, because he was getting offered an enormous amount in comparison to what he ended up accepting from the Waratahs by the Western Force to go play in that rapid rugby. But we had discussions. I said to him, mate, if you want to make a fist of this World Cup push, then you can't give anyone any reason to kind of second-guess decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And if you go over to Western Force and play in rapid rugby, which is not an established competition, and play really well, they would say, but it's rapid rugby. Like you're not playing at the super rugby level. But if you come back, play super rugby, albeit taking a fair hit to the pocket, but you play well here, then no one can really argue that. It might be that he's just good to be around in the squad and provide something through the week and really prepare the starting team well, get his opportunity against Georgia and Uruguay, and then, who knows where he ends up. Because I spoke to him last night, and I said, "Oh, mate, did you get a jersey?" And he said, "No, not this week." And and we both sort of said like it's a long tournament, and I was in the exact same position in 2015. I wasn't in the starting 23 in the first 2 games against Fiji and England, and just sort of I got an opportunity when Rob Horn got injured, but maintained that position even when he came back. And so a starting 15 this weekend is great, but it won't be the starting 15 in the World Cup final. Yeah. So I'm hoping that...
Do you reckon it's a more kind of explosive type of footy? There's more injuries in World Cup?
I mean, look, there's no time. There's nowhere in any other calendar in between World Cups where you're playing 7 international matches back to back. So 7 on the trot. You get 5 at a stretch on some spring tours, and we all see like the drop off by the back end of those tours in fatigue and all that sort of thing. So that's why this is such a big squad mentality push, and I think it's also the way that our pools panned out. Our 2 strong games first up. If we win those 2, when we win those 2, we're in a good position then to then rest a couple of guys and refreshen through that Georgia Uruguay, so that come quarter-final time we're ready to go.
Although you don't want to end up like the Springboks did the last big World Cup, where they rested a couple of players and ended up getting flogged by Japan. So
that was good footy.
That was great. And I think Japan will have their greatest Rugby World Cup to date. I think they'll beat Scotland, and they'll qualify second in their pool.
Right.
Which would be huge,
What do players get up to? Like, if it's 7 weeks back to back, you're not really allowed to have a drink.
Well, you're not allowed, but you do.
Yeah.
my mum brought me over a bottle of rum from customs.
Yeah, right.
And just said, "Oh, look, love, I don't know, it's a long tour and whatever, and here's a bottle just in case you want a little nip in, before bed or whatever."
Toothache or something.
Yeah. But I was rooming with Matt Giddo over there, and we reached out on Twitter and we wanted to get Jonah Lomu Rugby. And just through the Rugby Network and the Twitter sphere, as you like, we had 2 PlayStations and 2 Jonah Lomu Rugby games delivered to the hotel.
Oh, right.
Yeah, trade off for some kit. And so we just sit there overnight time, play some Jonah Lomu Rugby and have a couple of rums and put ourselves to sleep. So, but I mean, that was obviously not an every night thing, but a lot of Uno.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a lot of that. We just go to coffee and play a lot of that.
Real family holiday vibes.
Yeah. I mean, it's chilled. I mean, the last one we had those, is that, I don't know if it was a craze. It's probably...
Fidget spinners.
No, those little hoverboard things.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, yeah, everyone got those. Like we didn't. I don't even think my feet touched.
That sounds really, really dangerous. Like,
I know, right?
That is just asking to have your wrist smashed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they allowed us to do it because my feet didn't touch the carpet in the hotel once. Like, straight out of bed, I'd sit on it, go to the bathroom, I'd go into the lift. We even went over to the gym that was set up quite close to the field, into the hotel where we're at, and we go up the street to the recovery centre. Like it was pretty reckless in hindsight, but we were pretty lucky that no one got injured as a cause of those.
Did you see the culture change on tour from the start to the end of your career?
Yeah, I think, I think a lot of it's come from external pressures, sponsorship, media and the reporting of it. I think that a sad thing for me is in today's media is that newspapers and the like is starting to ask people to send in stories or send in photos, and that just breeds a really poor culture. Like when you go out and just having a quiet beer or something, and then
poor old Steve Smith in New York getting hammered when he's trying to keep a low profile.
Yeah, I mean that kind of thing.
He was in the middle of a big band, so I guess he isn't going to be like, well, I've got a big game in New York at the end of the week.
Yeah, but the user-generated news is...
Yeah, I mean that changes it. My first spring tour, 2004, we arrived and it was Halloween.
Yeah, right.
And we got split up into mini groups and tight 5, back row.
Front rowers union.
Yeah, and inside backs and outside backs, and you'd go out and we were playing dodgeball at the walkabout with pumpkin heads and completely loose.
Yeah.
But that was the encouragement. Go out and stay up as long as you can, so you get a decent sleep, and we'll start. And then but everyone, there was a real culture back then. By your Georgie Smiths, your Jeremy Pauls, and the guys that like to enjoy themselves. Yeah. to enjoy themselves, but they really drove if you want to play up, you front up.
Yeah.
And in the moment you didn't back up and train and aim up at training, was then you basically got told, not from the management but from the players, you're now you're not able to go out. So from straight away there was an expectation on each other. And then, from a young guy coming in, I just didn't want to put a foot wrong. So, and I think that's also where the shift is as well, in having so many elder statesmen and so many guys that you respect. There's a different culture within the team with that as well. But it's a shame now when you see it so much. Oh, why can't they stay off the piss? It's like they're professional. They get paid $1 million. They should stay. It doesn't matter how much you get paid, right?
Yeah.
Anyone from 18 to 35... You're asking them to not have a vice from January to December, and then we wonder why there's indiscretions in December because they're all of a sudden it's like their first drink ever. And so I think we got into a period here at Rugby Australia Western Force where we're getting breathalyzed. The day after a game we had to be 0.
Breathalyzed?
We're getting breathalyzed the morning after recovery and you had to be 0. I was like, so I could legally drive at
that
0.03.
Stinks of Robbie Deans.
Well, I mean,
Sleeper cell.
You took the words right out.
That kind of moves me on to my next question, is that for years and years and years, the yardstick by which every team is measured is the All Blacks.
Yeah.
Do you think that the All Blacks have a culture like this where if you work hard, you can party hard, and if you party hard, don't get caught?
Yeah, I mean...
Don't hang out with Lockyer.
You know what, I think, I think that you get 30 guys in an environment for a long period of time, immensely disciplined and focused and make sacrifices. There's got to be a release, right? Like everyone needs a release at some point, but everyone does it to varying degrees as well. I mean, I don't think a Rich McCaw wouldn't necessarily go out there and get too loose. But
You go play with his flight simulator somewhere.
yeah, drunken flying in a simulator or something. No, but there would be some guys in that All Black environment over the last 10 years when they've been completely dominant, where they would have been able to. And I've had some big nights with All Blacks after games. So it's about the culture in which they created, the respect that they've got for one another to know when to do it, how far to push it, but when to aim up. And when you get that right, that can be a really powerful thing. And, I think for a period there, when Michael Cheika came in, he's like, look, I'm not going to have rules and curfews and breathalyzers and all the rest of it. He said, I'm going to treat you like men, and I expect you to act like men. But if you act like kids, then I'll treat you like kids, right? Whereas I think previous administrations and coaches, and not just the Wallabies, but other Super Rugby teams, went the other way and said, straight away, we're going to treat you like kids. So what we got were people acting like kids. And that's where we had, in those periods where we actually had the strictest rules, we had more off-field indiscretions than ever.
You were privy to the kind of, you got to see the Brat era when it was in full flight. A lot of those guys are growing up now, and most of them are playing.
Back
this weekend. And that wasn't a new thing, although every single time it happened, it's a generational fucking warfare. They always argue that this is new and the young kids don't have respect, but the generation before that did that as well.
Mate, I wasn't in a position where I just got to see that. Like, I was a part of it, like to again, varying degrees. Like, but also maturity and experience perhaps got me away with a little bit more, or I just had a better understanding of when to call it a night, or when to remove myself from an inflammatory situation or something like that. And that's where I think
the moonwalk.
Just like, this is on you, boys. But I think that's also the shift as well. When they say a generational thing, it was happening years ago, but there wasn't someone sitting there recording it, or there wasn't someone capturing it, or there wasn't someone tweeting it going, "Oh, these guys were playing pokies the night before a game." Like like it's.
But that said, like you're good mates with Giddo. Yeah. Giddo had that about him. Giddo had that whole. He was brushed with that whole James O'Connor thing 15 years ago. Yeah. And he came back, and everyone, I think, deep down knew that O'Connor would do that, right? Yeah. But he seemed pretty bad when he left. Yeah, I mean, it probably just took him a little bit longer than everyone had hoped to realise that. And, and you say, like a lot of people have said, like surely at some point when he left Australian rugby unceremoniously and went over the first time, that surely he's learnt now. And he came back and it didn't work for the Reds, and he went back and got in trouble in France. Sure, it's like, because he didn't learn then, we should he'll never learn, and we should never accept him back. And he's kind of gone on this, I don't know, I don't like the term, but he's gone on this journey. Yeah. But whatever it is, it's ringing true to him, and it's working. Playing good footy. That's all. And the good thing is, he's not just saying the right things, but he's backing it up with his actions. And like, I'm super proud of James to to see where he's come from and how far he's got himself to be in this position, because it was last year's spring tour where he asked me, do you mind putting me in touch with Michael Cheika? And I said, mate, I'll do it, but I'm going to ask Check if he minds first before just giving you his number. And do you reckon Check has changed the whole 2 years ago, even a year ago, 3 years ago, though, rugby felt pretty grim in Australia. Yeah. Do you reckon that's been Cheika? Do you reckon he's kind of changed this whole atmosphere, this attitude? There's a bit more of a winning feeling, a bit more winning culture. What? Like, Check is a guy, and like, I admire him a lot. I don't try and hide behind that. He's a former coach of mine. He has picked me, and he's also dropped me, and we've had a really stern talking to where we're poking each other in the chest. Yeah. But I think when you front someone like that, especially the personality like Check, I think he respects you for it. Yeah. And that didn't get me picked, but it got it off my chest. Yeah. But he's just a guy that just doesn't give a shit about what anyone thinks. Yeah. Like, externally, he'll have his close confidants of people that he confides in, and that he respects their opinion and all that sort of thing. But he does well under siege. Yeah. He loves that. Yeah. Like, that's where he thrives, and it's almost like for Rugby Australia to do well, like, we all should almost manufacture a little bit more of that, like, so that he's very good at it's sort of us versus them. And Raylene does pretty well, to be honest. Look, I also really like Raylene as well. I think she came in at a really difficult time. She came in, the first thing she had to deal with was the first The first Instagram
tweet,
post.
our first Instagram post, and then that went for a period of time from Israel, and then 12 months later I had to revisit it again. Plus the game was nowhere near at its strongest, and she kind of assumed a role in an organisation at that level. There are going to be people there that want it to thrive. There are going to be people there to serve their own agendas, and you need a period of time to know who to trust, right? And unfortunately, during that period of time, we're in a position where we're under siege, and so I think in some ways she's been unfairly judged for a large part of her role, and I think moving forward, and I think also you have a coach come in, you get a result that weekend, or a player comes in, you get a result that weekend on their performance, and someone in administration takes over the reins. It takes quite a long time to see the effect that they've actually had with things they've implemented. But when we're so passionate as rugby supporters, and we know that our game's not anywhere near where we want it or we feel like it should be, we want immediate change, and we want. And if we don't see that, then we pick off whoever it is in the driver's seat.
She has done well, and I guess she'd come from. It's a different background where she's come from. I guess she's come from the Bulldogs. She'd be used to being under siege and the fucking things she had to deal with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think even how she left the Bulldogs, I don't. I think it's misguided in that people felt threatened by her, so they got rid of her. It wasn't because she wasn't capable. It was just like, what, this is our boys' club, and we're starting to get exposed. Let's get rid of whoever it is that's doing the exposing. So Raylene wasn't the CEO in my time. I've just met her since I've retired, and I've been really impressed by her. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of the things that transpire, and that we can actually say, that's like her thumbprint on that.
Can you tell us, like, I mean, if you were playing, what Izzy was getting up to, how would have that affected the team? Can the players actually just put the blinkers on to that kind of off-field shit?
Well, again, it's different, right? Experienced players can. Young guys coming through, like when I was talking about not knowing what my ideal preparation was, maybe I couldn't have. Maybe these young guys haven't got to that point where they're able to flick on the switch and flick it off when they leave the field. But there's always potential for that type of... I mean, it had an effect. It's probably still having an effect, but the biggest thing is limiting that effect, right? And Michael Hooper, because obviously it was Waratah's time at the time, really quick to get the senior players in, and also then the Wallaby camps through that, the course of the Super Rugby time, where all the teams from each of the Super Rugby teams came together, and they addressed it quickly. But the important thing is with those types of issues is understanding that you're going to have people on both sides of the argument, right? There are people who are really religious, and also people who are really tight with Israel, and also people who are completely opposed to what he said. First you've got to recognise and acknowledge that there's going to be differing opinions in that group.
You've got to read the room.
But then you've also got to give a platform for everyone to be heard, right? And not just be heard in that, we tick the box, everyone said their piece, but be heard and then understand what it is that they're struggling with, or what it is that they feel, aggrieved by, and then given that opportunity to be supported either way. Because I think the moment you deny someone's opinion because it's not the same as yours, that then has the potential to cause a toxic environment, right? And fractions within the group and all that sort of stuff. And so I think they did a really good job in getting everyone together, giving everyone a platform, giving everyone the time to say what it is that they wanted to say, and then addressing it, and so that they could, at some point, as quickly as they could, park it, and then just focus on the task at hand, which was preparing for this World Cup. So I don't see it as being an issue now. I think, it would have had an issue with the Waratahs, mid-season, and it had the potential for the Wallabies, but I don't think it would have had too much.
Yeah, they shut it down before that.
Well, now that that's behind everyone, and it hasn't really affected the preparations too much, you'd think, with the results against the All Blacks. So moving forward to the World Cup.
One of those results.
Well,
the Perth result.
You've got to take your good with the bad. Especially in rugby.
Exactly.
But just moving forward to the World Cup, providing that we make it out of the pool.
Which we will.
Which you'd hope.
We've got to get some coach whisper shit going on
in this pool.
We will win against the opposition.
How deep do you reckon we can go? Because the Wallabies have have a track record of going deep at World Cups.
Yeah, we love going deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mate, honestly, look, I'm obviously biased as well. Like, I'm a super fan as much as I am a former player as well. So, I grew up watching them and wanting to be a part of it. And then I was just one of the lucky few that had that chance to pull the jersey on. But I have really strong faith in their ability to bind together and singularly focus on that outcome. And they'll build momentum through that campaign. And I honestly see Australia playing South Africa in the final.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think South Africa will beat the All Blacks on Saturday.
The All Blacks are going to choke again, are they?
Well, I mean, they're your words. I just think, like, a month ago in the Rugby Championship, South Africa played New Zealand in Wellington and it was a draw.
Yeah.
They're now in neutral territory. New Zealand has suffered another loss since then, which was against Australia.
Yeah.
Sure, they bounced back really well against us in Eden Park. Had basically a trot around against Tonga. But I think of the last 3 World Cups, they're not as dominant as they have been going into this one. And South Africa, for me, like, they've got a really deep squad.
Yeah.
Any one of their players that aren't wearing a jersey this weekend could go in, and do a job. What I would really love is for the Wallabies to play the All Blacks in a semi-final.
Yeah.
I've got to look at whether that's even possible with the draws, quarter-final or semi-final, because it'll be the 3rd time we play them this year. And I'd love for the New Zealand Rugby Union to go, look, we're going to put the Bledisloe on the line for here. It's 1-1.
Yeah.
And not only is it to get through to the World Cup final, but it's also for the Bledisloe or something like that. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
It would be.
I mean, because there's been...
Did they play well in Japan, the All Blacks?
They beat us there.
Yeah. They also play quite well in Chicago. They've had a couple of games over there against the Eagles.
Yeah. Well, they lost to Ireland in America.
Yeah, right.
I think it was in Chicago. But
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Did they lose a bit of steam with Richie? And
you know what?
and
Like we thought the year after Rugby World Cup, there's no Carter, no Nonu, no McCaw. Like, how's our chance? And they've got Barrett, Kane, Reed. So I mean, testament to them, right? Like, it's one thing being the best in the world, but to be able to maintain that for a long period of time, like, they're a pretty handy side. And I played 18 games or something against them, 1-2.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like...
Well, that was in the peak of his 85% win rate, Richie's as captain, right?
Yeah. Well, see, and I actually think that maybe they're a chance now that I'm not there. Because in 2001, I was a part of the Australian schoolboys team that played a game down here in Sydney, and we went to Rugby Australia's head office, and at the time we were the holders of Bledisloe and World Cup trophies. Yeah. And I got a photo with both of them, and it was the last time I've touched either of them. So maybe I put some type of jinx on any team that I was in to actually not be able to achieve it. So I'm hoping that the boys go out there this Rugby World Cup and bring it back.
Well, it's the first one where the Irish are going in as the number 1 team in the world. So that'd be interesting.
It's interesting how they come to that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, the All Blacks have they've lost 1 game this year. They've drawn 1 against South Africa. And Wales went to number 1 2 weeks ago. Wales haven't beaten the All Blacks since the 50s.
Yeah.
And then they're now at number 4 and they've only lost 1 game since. Even Augustine Pichot, the long-haired Argentinian halfback of yesteryear, he's the vice president of World Rugby, and he said, these rankings are a joke. And he's like, so mate, they're your rankings. But I think the only ones that are really taking them seriously, the rankings, are the Irish and Welsh supporters in the last couple of weeks. But I the ones that matter are, November 3 once the World Cup's decided.
Where do you think, Australia's such a big country and there's so many different rugby fan bases, but New Zealand, it's top to bottom, you know what I mean? Yeah. What was it like for you walking the streets there in
New Zealand?
Yeah, as a Wallaby. Did they...
you know what, generally they're pretty good, right? Maybe the times after a game where everyone's been at the cake tin or Eden Park and they're full as a boot, then some get a little bit boisterous. But I think on a large part, more often than not, they're really respectful in that way. The ones where someone will come up here and up to you in Australia and ask for a photo,
and the last minute,
of course,
they pull a face.
and then the last minute they go to the All Blacks, and you're like,
sure.
And I think it's like the funniest thing in the world. I'm like, you guys got to get better humour. But then they go, well, you guys got to get better at rugby. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Where do you see little heartlands in Australia? Obviously, North Brisbane, where you grew up.
Yeah.
Whether that's North or the Filth, it's like a.
Well, I was Pine Rivers Pumas.
Yeah, right.
But then my Colts was UQ.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was on an Australian schoolboys tour, and it was largely filled with the Queensland schoolboys team, and we were all on the tour like, well, we were going to play Colts next year, and basically 10 went to UQ and 10 went to Sunnybank.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, there are
two vastly different demographics.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, we went through undefeated. We beat them in the finals, so that was a nice little cherry on the top. But I mean, there are so many different like little heartlands everywhere you go. You know, there's country teams. There's
the New England, North New South Wales.
Yeah, like
Tamworth. Yeah.
I just think, you know what? I think for too long we've relied on the GPS system to provide our future Wallabies and now Wallaroos as well. And I just. Like for me, having the Indigenous jersey been introduced to actually a playing strip in the last few years has been like a huge step forward for us. But in saying that, in the graphic of the jersey, there were 14 pools, right? Like in the artwork of it, and each pool represented
a player,
the 14 Indigenous players that have played for the Wallabies. Now there are over 950 people that have played for Australia. To only have 14 Indigenous representatives, I think for us is like that's a real shame, right? Yeah. And it's a shame because we haven't gone, you know, to the Indigenous communities. We haven't gone into Central Australia and not just provide them with an opportunity as a pathway for rugby, but everything that rugby gives us, which for me was education. It was like healthcare. It was like all these other issues in society that we're privy to, and you know, I feel like we're not doing enough.
Yeah, La Perouse is pretty much the only community that they kind of tapped into there with the Ellers and
So
Randwick.
I think I think that's our next.
Yeah, right.
I think that should be our next thing, not just to provide people with, you know, not because we want to just make them all, give them opportunities to play for the Wallabies, but it gives us so much. You know, even if I wasn't to play, like the feel that you get at your local club team or your school team, because some of the most fond memories that I have from rugby are my school ones. Like, you know, when you're going to school,
when you won that first match, and
exactly, mate. I remember we lost to Morris Brothers Ashgrove 13-7. We took a photo of the scoreboard because we never got that close. Like, you know, but we, you know, from 13 to 17, 18 years old, you're spending from 8 a.m. in the morning to some nights 6 o'clock after training. But through all your like adolescent years where you're going through puberty and you're getting your first girlfriends and you're failing at school, you're succeeding, you're
still playing footy every Saturday morning.
But you're riding through this with all your mates, so you know each other like far deeper than you do it at a professional level. So that's why I also think it's a really important thing to have access to at schools, and not just the GPS schools, but every school. And you know, and if
they'll be playing in that jersey.
Yeah, against Uruguay.
So
and then I think they've also asked for the quarter or semi-final, should we make it through. Yeah. We've requested that we play in that. So that'll be dependent on who.
But if it is a final against South Africa, they might be playing in the Indigenous jersey. An alternative strip.
Yeah, well, that's it. So depends on who. There might be a toss. So like who's the home team. If we are, then they'd have to wear their alternative strip. So I think it's a beautiful looking jersey, but the sentiment behind it is one that it's great that we have it, but it's also, I think, too late. But we can't change what's happened in terms of the jersey. But I think the artwork, and I've suggested this to Raylene actually, I think the artwork should be embedded in the jersey, right? Because, you know, like it's part of who we are. It's the thread of our nation, right? And I think if the jersey, so you could only, like, still from afar it looks like the normal Wallaby gold jersey, but if you're up close you can see the different design through it, so it's a part of the thread of our jersey as much as it is the thread of our country as well. So and then on those the one-off games that we choose to really highlight it and pop it with the green or whatever colours, we can do that as well. But
I mean, it makes sense considering it was 15 years ago the All Blacks were trolling out new harkers on us and scaring the fuck out of us. What was that one they did? Did you ever face that one?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was when
I wish they still did that.
Yeah,
that was the coolest thing.
I mean, like Yeah, that's the politically correct world coming in saying, you know what, you can't be doing that. I'm like,
Suppose you can't do that now.
I hope they're not going to do that. Like, but I mean, the haka, some people don't like it. Some people think it gives them an unfair advantage. I think it's part of what makes rugby quite unique because,
and I say for a lot of people who don't watch rugby, they know about the haka. You know
exactly
what I mean?
right. And I just think, the haka is done by other sporting teams.
The worst is the tall blacks. The basketball. Yeah. They do it in the shoes. But
it also looks like, and I've spoken to Ali Williams about this. I said, mate, you look like a pelican trying to take flight. Like you're out there and you had these big long arms just like flapping around. And he always made himself really quite obvious out on the front right flank. But he, because he was our teammate of ours in Toulon. But he just said, mate, like I knew I looked stupid, but I was so into it that I didn't care. And that's, I think, when you're facing it, it's just raw emotion. Like whether it's theirs or not, you feel it, and it really gets the hairs standing up on the back of my neck just talking about it now. Like it's a really cool thing to be a part of, but it doesn't mean to say that we then line up at kickoff time just quivering in our boots. Like
some people get fired up by watching it.
Yeah, well, see,
Did you?
I was never really the fire up guy. But sometimes the All Blacks now take a little bit of time after it because when they receive a kickoff, they feel like it'd been said at one point that they felt they were still so high on emotion that they'd get a bit like snatchy or jittery at the ball. Yeah. So when we'd put the ball up or someone would put the ball up, they often would make an error off that first kickoff because they were still so highly strung because of the haka. Right. So they'd now take and teams would take some time to take their tracksuit off and just really try whatever. But in actual fact, teams should really try and get that ball in play as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I heard that the same thing used to happen to the Wallabies when they used to listen to Waltzing Matilda. After the kickoff, they used to get
John Williamson.
so amped. It's like,
John.
That was great for atmosphere. It was never really going to get anyone fired up, but but I do remember we played a couple of games where we'd won, and John Williamson would get on the bus, and because after every Test match win on the bus on the way back to the hotel, we'd sing True Blue, and a couple of occasions we had John playing it while we're not having to listen to it on Spotify or something. So they were pretty cool moments. But my first ever haka from a All Black team. So I'd done it in junior teams, but never All Blacks until my first ever start. So Latho got injured and I got the fullback jersey and Tana Umaga was their captain.
Oh, boy.
Right? Yeah. And he was saying all week, we're going to target this young guy at the back. And I was like, I don't need to read that.
Telling the media that.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, shit. And so I'm like, what have I got myself into, I think it's maybe a second or third cap. It was my first start. And so I go out for the haka, and at that time I was like, there's so much going on that you don't really know where to look. I'm almost like a bit of
you make eye contact with Tana.
But then I did. I made eye contact with Tana Umaga, and the guy's like a scary looking dude, right? With his dreadlocks, and he's just his aura, and he's his reputation. Yeah, he's an amazing guy, right? But when he's staring you down doing this haka, I'm like, and then so I'm staring at him and I'm like, shit, he might think I'm throwing a challenge back at him.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, well, if I look away, he's going to think I'm a pussy. So I was having this real moral conundrum in my mind, just going, do I look away? No, I don't. And I'm like,
don't smile.
Yeah.
No.
And then they finished it and we got on with the game. But I scored a try maybe 20 minutes into that game. I got back to halfway and vomited my guts up. All these nerves that I was just sort of trying to hold down, just went, nah, I'm going to get out. So, yeah, thanks for that one, Tana. Yeah.
Well, what are we thinking? Fiji, how much by this weekend, you reckon?
I said 15.
Yep.
Yeah, 15, I think. Look, they're an amazing side, Fiji. Their back line would win X Factor if they all went on there.
Yeah, right.
They're that good, right? Even to be fair to their forward pack, some pretty handy players. They're their second rower, Nakarawa. He won a gold medal in the sevens team at the Olympics.
Right.
Could you imagine one of our locks playing sevens?
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen, right? Yeah. No. So I mean, they're stupidly skillful. I just think if we go if we stick to the structure of our game, then we'll we should probably do it
Yeah.
reasonably comfortably.
Yeah.
But if we get lured into playing an offload, high-paced, transitional type of game,
3G
then that's
football.
where
Yeah.
that would play right into their hands.
Yeah.
We just have to play the full 80.
Yeah, exactly. And
As I always say.
I mean, this is a game where you almost, as fans, we want it to see like a really entertaining game.
Mm-hmm.
But for the Wallabies, almost need to like really dull it down and just play corners, because Semi Radradra, he has almost played exclusively at outside centre in his rugby career. So he's on the wing this time. So positionally, there could be an opportunity behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Tuisolva, he's a former teammate of mine at Toulon. He's a beast.
Yeah.
Like, that guy is an absolute animal. Watch him. I think he'll really take this World Cup by storm.
Yeah.
But positionally, perhaps not his strongest suit of his game. So I know we say we sometimes we kick the ball away too much, but I think there'll be time for good, well executed tactical kicking if they do it well. Yeah. If they don't, they're going to get burnt.
Well, there it is. Thanks for joining us, Drew.
No worries. Thanks, boys.
Thanks.
No worries.
Well, good luck to the Wallabies, and good luck to the other, second teams that we all might have out there.
Who would be your second team?
I mean, I was going to say Georgia, but it turns out we're playing them. So,
well, yes, Georgians. They're going to be strong. They're forward pack. There are 30 Fijian professional wingers in top 14 in France.
Yeah, right.
There are 30 Georgian props. So they're going to be strong.
Yeah.
They're going to be strong. Yeah.
Well, I guess.
Who else? Is there any other South Americans?
I was born
Brazil?
in Hong Kong, so
Okay.
I was very filthy that
they just missed out, actually.
that they got beaten by those fucking Canadians. So I guess I'm gonna have to go with Canada.
Okay, nice. Yeah, mine obviously would be French.
Yeah.
I've spent a bit of time there. But,
And you're friends with the guitars.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No, it's
and
gonna be
you
good.
obviously like to eye gouge people too. Don't you?
Thanks for joining, Drew.
No worries. Thanks for having me,
mate.
guys.
Thank you.